All right. You guys both there?
I am. Abram, how you doing?
Hey, how you doing, Dr. Kirkland? It's good to hear from you.
I'm good.
All right. We ready to go, Abram?
Yeah, so here's our musical selection for the day.
Welcome to The Radical Bureaucrat, a podcast for people who want to change institutions from the inside.
Today is Wednesday, March 25th, and it feels like the eyes of the world are on New York City as the numbers rise here. In the middle of all this, we're thrilled to talk to a man who's been an inspiration and a leader for both of us. Dr. David Kirkland is widely recognized as a leading national scholar and advocate for educational justice. He's the executive director of the New York University Metropolitan Center for Research on Equity and the Transformation of Schools. NYU Metro Center is nationally and internationally renowned for its work on educational equity and school improvement. It brings together scholars, educators, and innovators from diverse backgrounds to collaborate on a range of projects to strengthen and improve access, opportunity, and educational quality across varied settings, but particularly in striving communities. The center also boasts a broad and bold research agenda that touch topics ranging from girls and juvenile justice to the education, language, and literacy of men and boys of color. And as a very current example of the work that Metro Center does, just yesterday they put out a whole resource hub on culturally responsive and sustaining education in the current remote teaching and learning environment. So for those of you who are doing remote teaching and remote learning environments, there's a whole resources at NYU Metro Center around guidance on how to do that according to good practices. So to me, David's voice is definitely an inspiration. I feel like he's a man that has the message, and I want to hear it whenever I can. His ideas are illuminating, and the work that he leads is impactful on a number of levels.
Yeah. And I first met David, I think you did too, when he supported the founding of the Alliance for School Integration and Desegregation. He was hands-on in supporting it both personally and in putting Metro Center behind getting this kind of grassroots organizing effort off the ground. He facilitated our first meetings. He helped us conceptualize the work. And since then, Metro Center has supported our work in ACID, but a number of small nonprofit organizations devoted to integration and culturally responsive and sustaining education around New York City. So I've seen him both as someone who behind the scenes is really putting his money where his mouth is in terms of supporting grassroots efforts to transform the system, and also somebody who is widely recognized and as an inspirational speaker, as a thought leader, as a scholar. And so we're just really, really pleased to have you on today. Welcome, David.
Yep, welcome.
Thank you both. Wow. Thank you for such an amazing introduction. I hope this conversation and my work, do that introduction justice.
We're thrilled to have you. I'm sure it will.
Yeah, I'm not worried about it. So yeah, David, how are you doing? How are things going? How are you hanging in there? How's the team? How's the family? How are you doing?
Personally, I'm okay. A little cabin fever. I've been in sheltering in place, for the past 11 days. And, I've had opportunities to connect with my team. The thing that you remember, when you're tossed in situations like this is how much you need people and how connected we are. I just got off of a call with my team and, just seeing those faces, and I told them that I miss them. I told them that I love them. And I know that I miss them because I've gotten accustomed over the past 5 years of waking up every day, and looking forward to seeing their faces, and something in me, longs for them, in this moment. Unfortunately, it's sometimes in times of crisis that reality hits where we really, understand that it's not about, how much money we make. It's not about, who gets to be, heard or who gets to be on stage or on television or wherever the privileged or, status spaces are. And really it's about people. And I think that that's what NYU Metro Center stands for. That's what I've stood for. I stood for people, and centering people. I think the other reality of this moment, I have a mom in Michigan, who's over 65 years old. Mm-hmm. And Michigan right now is beginning to get hit with COVID-19, and she's alone, and every day I'm thinking about her. And so I'm thinking less about my situation and more about the situation of the people that we care about, that we're responsible for, like my mom or like our young people here in New York City, who's going to have their education this year cut short, especially students, who are already vulnerable, to educational systems. One question that I've had and I'm continuing to have, what will it mean, to teach ninth graders who never finished eighth grade? What will it mean, for seniors or for freshmen going to college, who were looking forward to prom and never had it? And do we have solutions to begin to respond to, the human needs that people are having right now?
Yeah. I mean, that framing is right on. And it's almost like we can't talk about this without making a connection from our personal circumstances to the circumstances of everyone around us. I was saying to Abram before we got on, like, I could complain about my situation, right, but I see bigger challenges everywhere else that I look. And I do want to say, when we do these interviews, we like to really ground it in the personal, and the personal can be about the work. So we wanted to ask you, what's a challenge that you're facing individually today? What's top of your mind today? Is it that those students, like, where is it?
I mean, personally, I'm okay. I'm a healthy, relatively young person. I live in New York City, at the epicenter of, our current pandemic, but there's a lot of quiet. There are a lot of resources that I have. What crowds my mind space right now,
right,
are individuals who are not as privileged as me, as both you and Abram know. I wasn't always as privileged as I am right now. I grew up in a brothel in Detroit, Michigan. I spent the ages of 12 and 13 homeless, living on the streets of Detroit. There was no shelter to be in place, for, right? My mother self-medicated as a result of, the hard life, of having two young kids before the age of 17, and doing whatever she had to do in order to help us to survive, right? I mean, I'm no stranger, to struggle. But I'm also very much acquainted with, what some of the hardships of people who are vulnerable, some of the hardships that they or we face. And right. So as I sit or stand in a, privileged position, executive director of a major research center, a professor at, a prestigious university, I recognize, and remember, I recall what it means to be, a vulnerable young man growing up in the city streets of Detroit, relying upon the state in order to, provide for us, a state that wasn't always, ready, our students in New York City, are like me, they depend on, places like school, for food and safety. I remember being homeless. When I was homeless, the year of my life that I spent homeless, I would go to school every day. And the reason I went to school every day, because I didn't have anywhere else to go. Mm-hmm. And I would get a meal, a square meal, right. At school. And if I had any other need or service, if I was sick, there was a school nurse that could take care of me, right? And we have students who live this reality every day, and it's no small number. Here in New York City, we estimate about 110,000 students live in situations of precarious housing, much like I did growing up. We also can estimate that the majority of our students in the city live in some other form of vulnerability where, they live in situations and environments where parents have to work. And so there's a question about what does it mean to shelter in place without the supervision of a parent, right? Without the supervision or the company and the safety of, somebody to look out for you. So what I'm thinking about right now, what's most personal to me right now as I stand in my privileged position, is the incredible empathy that I'm having right now for young people, who are being tossed into, a situation without adequate support. And we haven't done enough necessarily, to be responsive to what their needs might be.
Oh, yeah. Like, I really want to get into that. And so how is that? And I know that everything is changing day to day, both from the circumstances around us, but in terms of also just how we're approaching our work. But right now, how's that impacting the work that and your approach to the work? Where are you trying to position your team? Where's your team trying to position itself in order to make an impact on some of these issues that you're thinking about?
Yeah, we have to come out of the situation far stronger, with much more resolve than we went into it. Like, normal cannot be acceptable anymore, or what was normal can no longer be acceptable. I'm looking at the data. I'm looking at situations. I'm looking at who gets to live and who gets to die. I'm looking at who gets to get a test and who doesn't. I'm thinking about who's enjoying remote education, who is prepared or familiar with, the systems and tools, and who have access to those things and who don't. Yeah. And it's telling a story that we already knew. Right. That we have a tale of two experiences, two pathways in this country. One is for the privileged and one is for the vulnerable. And too often the vulnerable happens to be, people who are black and brown or speak languages other than English, or who have abilities that, are not recognized, or disabilities that are not necessarily supported. These are individuals who, happen to not have homes, to shelter in, right? And so I think my mindset, it's just so different right now, in this time. We know that our teachers need to be supported, but also know that in this moment of remote education, especially for vulnerable people, it's not the teachers who are delivering instruction. It's our parents. And so our parents also need to be supported. We know that our students need to be supported, because some of our students are sad. They're sad because they're going to have to miss prom. They're sad because they're going to miss their friends at school. They're sad because something is happening in the world, and we have no adequate way of explaining to them, what's happening in our world. I'm sad because, I understand right now in this moment where we can muster the courage, to raise $500 billion to bail out corporations, that we can have a tariff, right, a stimulus package of $2 trillion. I mean, did you get that? $2 trillion.
Right.
To make sure an economy, right, the fixed capitalism continues, but we cannot rise. We cannot galvanize, the courage, and the wisdom in order to shelter the needs of people who are most needed. Who are most needy in this situation, right? So I'm sad because I understand that we have, collective needs, and yet so often that collective means has failed to meet the needs of individuals, who happen to be vulnerable, in our society. And we know that this is baked into, ideologies of race and racism. It's baked into ideologies of economic oppression and sexism, xenophobia, and other forms of oppression that articulate themselves, daily. But I'm encouraged by this one thing.
Okay.
And now we can't deny that courageous things are possible. We can't deny the fact that when we want to, that we can come together and that we can care for each other, that we can service, the needs of our public and our population. We can no longer deny that those things that we've been asking for is possible. And so hopefully at NYU Metro Center, we'll continue to work to support the needs of vulnerable people, but hopefully now we do so with a renewed energy and urgency, and that we renew our commitment to putting pressure on those institutions, that have been given responsibility to service the needs of all citizens of this country, not just the privileged ones. And I hope that we do that in greater conversation and in partnership with organizations throughout not only New York City, but throughout, the country and not the globe.
Yeah, I hope so too.
I was on a call today where a leader who I respect was saying that, what people were, in early March is still who they are now. Now there's just a crisis that kind of amplifies the ways in which the way we are isn't working for everyone. And I think what you're saying feels so resonant with me and with what I understand. And I think, I spend a lot of time talking to people, my age and slightly younger, who have that, who have achieved some level of privilege, a place of standing in the, in the middle carriages of, the train, so to speak, and who feel such weight of knowing how many needs are going unmet day in and day out, that we are churning out the repetition of this system that none of us likes, and yet we're stuck in it. And I think really this moment gives us a chance to work from the human as a starting point, instead of working from the kind of like external goals that are put on us, whether that's a test score goal or a profit bottom line goal or whatever the kind of external driven goal is. A thing like this makes us face that fundamental vulnerability of our shared humanity. And it's going to make us face a lot of stories where that vulnerability is concentrated, which I know is a language that I've heard you use and appreciate. The way that we see vulnerability concentrated, the way that we're going to see that play out in this city over the next few weeks, I think we're going to have some reckoning, some accounting to do for all of this, for what we've built.
Yes. I mean, I think that reckoning is now, right? I mean, I just heard, that, nonviolent offenders are going to be let out of prison. Question I have is if we can let them out of prison, right? We believe that they will be no threat to public safety. Why are they in prison in the first place? Mm-hmm. Like we have to reconcile. You talk about reckoning. We have to reconcile some of the decisions that we have made. I heard that New York City police are going to not be locking up or, not harassing individuals for low-level, quote-unquote, low-level offenses. Well, my question is, why were we harassing them in the first place? Right? Well, why does it take a crisis in order for, policymakers to begin to make decisions that we could have made pre-crisis that could have made people's lives a lot better? Right, that reckoning is right now because, to be sure, we're taking notes. And while New York State and other states in the United States have paused, oppression doesn't. And I agree with you, Abram. I agree that, what this crisis is doing, it's not, changing us, it's revealing us. And, I'm glad to see that there are individuals, during this time of crisis who have determined to rise to the occasion. To rethink the way that we have done business and who have decided that the way that we have been doing business in this country has been backwards and that in order to go forward, we have to rethink what we do and the way that we do it and begin to center the individuals that we have failed to center all along. That if American society is about all of us, not just the young and healthy, the rich and wealthy, if it's about all of us, then we need to have a deeper national conversation. Again, I'm encouraged that we can have that conversation now because the data is on the table. All of us have to look at, how our response is. We got a president who's talking about, some lives being expendable. As a black man in the United States, I understand what it means to have your life as expendable. But now he's talking about, people who happen to be older or have pre-existing conditions as expendable. And I tell you, the far majority of us, we do not believe that is an option, that human life can never be expendable. And I'm glad that, you and Sam, and other partners in my organization, NYU Metro Center, is continuing to fight the fight, and that fight is that all life, especially vulnerable lives, deserves, the type of attention, the type of respect that more privileged lives, tend to get in this country.
Yeah. I think that I'm just paraphrasing what I'm hearing from both of you, but I have seen and it certainly comes across in 45's comments, people saying we need to get back to normal, and it's like, no, this is showing us that is not what we need. And in fact, and I think inherent in that statement is a sense of there's now during the crisis, and then there will be afterwards. And there's a certain sense in which the crisis is just accentuating the reality that was already there. Yes, everyone's life is different for sure right now, but this is, like that leader was saying, this is how we were before, and this is potentially how we'll be afterwards. Yeah. And I wonder, one question I've been grappling with is, what is the most important thing that schools can and should be doing right now? You know, we are rolling out remote learning in New York and in DC and in LA and a number of other large school districts. But there are so many different ways that schools are doing it. And they all are a reflection of what the schools were doing a month beforehand. And so you have kind of very rigid and traditional approaches to it, to much more exploratory. And that's just the academic side. Because when I talk to counselors right now, Abram and I both work for the DOE, for the school system here in New York City. So we're hearing a little bit about what's going on from the school's approaches. And when I talk to counselors, we talk so much about just reaching out and having a conversation may be the most important thing. And yes. And we know that that's also important any time of year in any school. So I wonder how we can be thinking about what schools should be for right now, especially.
Well, I think schools need to be listening. I think the clarion call is there that we weren't ready for this pandemic. We weren't ready, for this event. Some schools have decided not even to go with remote education because they don't know how to do it, and they have no clue about how to ramp up and prepare, their teachers, and others in order to be responsive to the needs of, the individual students that they were serving. They're barely, able to respond to those needs, as you said, Sam, of their students, when physical spaces, are accessible, right? I think that this is a time for us to, just reach out and have conversations and listen, learn, and move from a place, of thick listening and, information informed by our partners, that we need to begin to take participatory approaches, that it can't be top down, that we have to, create spaces where young people can begin to teach us and tell us, how they feel and what they need, where families can be part of that conversation, where we can, collect resources and share those resources together to imagine schools in new ways. And the first step to doing any of that, it's just listening. It's listening. And putting in place, with some of these digital devices and apparatus, that can make listening possible and make listening happen. And in that listening, we have to, do the work that's necessary to interrupt our own biases that we might bring into that listening, so that we can hear things anew, so that, white supremacists, patriarchal, anti-black, brown, types of discourses do not filter the ways that we listen, right? I think the other thing, and that's part of that listening, is to allow other people to ask questions. As we listen, allow other people from our communities, people who don't typically get heard, right? People who had their, thumbs on the pulse of situations like this, allow them to begin to do some of the asking, while our young people and our families begin to do some of the answering, and we take notes as we, with them, begin to imagine and reimagine what education will look like, as we begin to prepare, for a system and create a system, that in its design is responsive to, whatever situation that might come up, because that is the system that we have. The current system that we have, and we know and we see, was not designed to be responsive to, concentrated vulnerability or crisis. It was designed for those who are already privileged, those who came packaged in a particular way. And for those students, the system always works. But when something heavy hits, the system begins to shut down. It begins to shudder because that's how it's been designed. And what we need to do is understand that that is a flaw in design, not necessarily, just a situation of crisis. And this is a good opportunity, as good as any, to think about how we should and can redesign, the education apparatus in this country.
Wow. Can I ask? Thank you for that. As usual, I feel like there's a lot of questions and thoughts, but one that maybe is useful on the podcast is, why is it so hard to listen? And in particular, why is it so hard once you get power to adopt that listener's posture?
Yeah, and then that's an amazing question, right? It's an amazing question. They got so many answers to it, and the answers are complex and they're intersectional. One reason, that it becomes impossible for those in power to listen, is the type of arrogance, that power concedes. There's a conceit to it, right? That people in power believe that they don't have to listen to other people. They believe that, listening is an infringement on power, that humility and spaces that allow for a different type of growth in humanity, does not allow for, power, right? I mean, and this is the type of, insecurity that comes with individuals that need to have power over other individuals. There are other forms of power. There's collective power. There is internal power, right? So we don't just have to have, the preposition of over next to power, like power over. We can also have power with and power within, which is a different type of power that requires that we do listen. But unfortunately, individuals who are obsessed with, the type of power over individuals, are also very, 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 insecure, in that, possession. I think the other reason that it's so difficult, to listen is because, unfortunately, I think that our education institutions believe that they have answers. And there's no evidence that shows me or suggests that we do. We've had static, patterns of oppression in education that have played out year to year. We can see it in discipline. We can see it in graduation rates. We can see it in academic achievement. And these are these are their measures, right? We can also see it in some of our measures, like efficacy and who gets to enjoy and not enjoy, the situation and environment of school, right? And so we see these like static disparities that are elastic and that stretch out through education, and yet they continue to do the same things, and they continue to insist that they have the answers when none of those answers have worked, and none of those answers continue to work. And so there's a type of stubbornness, to individuals in power and to the system itself. I think the bigger issue, though, deals with, who gets to talk and who gets to, and who has to listen. And this is about not only power, it's about oppression, right? We know that those in power are typically, white or male, cis, heteronormative, English speaking, able, and some of these other things. These people believe that they don't have to speak to, those, who don't necessarily possess those identities. Mm-hmm. If you're not Black, you're not listened to. If you're a woman, you're not listened to. If you are, otherly able, you're not listened to. If you don't speak English, you're not listened to. And the bogus proposition that goes along with that is that the more of those things you are, the less we give society permission to listen to you. If you don't have a certain number of letters behind your name, you don't get listened to. Mm-hmm. And herein lies the problem. We've normalized, the type of ignorance. We've normalized the idea that we only listen to some, as those things correspond with particular privileged social identities, and we do not listen to others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great answer. David, we always like to wrap up and ask our guests, before you go, one thing that's bringing you a sense of calm in the midst of all the stress that is around us right now?
Well, certainly a few things, are giving me calm in this moment. I do think that there's a silver lining to be found in all things.
Mm-hmm.
One silver lining that I can, find in this is a pollution in places like Wuhan, China, is dying down. We see pollution over Seattle and Los Angeles and even New York City beginning to diminish. That the land has called for, its own type of Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
We also see, the collective human spirit. I heard about the other day, people going shopping for people who are older and more vulnerable, in this moment of pandemic. I'm volunteering not only time, but also resources, to shop for other people. And some of these people are strangers. I'm always, amazed by the power, of the human spirit and its generosity. I think that will prevail ultimately. And I think that's what drives change, and it drives the type of transformation that we want to see, in this world. You can hear the birds again in Central Park.
Mm-hmm.
Out of my window with the quiet city, I can see the mourning doves, flock against my trees. Today I caught, a cardinal sitting in the midst of them. There's a calm and there's a quiet to the world. Not just a reckoning, but also an understanding, a deep understanding that in this engine, that we work through in the vacuum, of our day to day, the best of us, is all of us. And I think that we're beginning to, to recognize it if we look, hard enough and we stare at it.
Yeah. David, it's been a privilege. It's been, it fills my heart to hear your words. And I'm just so glad you were able to come on with us.
Thank you so much, Sam. And thank you too, Abram.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being a source of wisdom and calm and leadership in the storm. I know that a lot of people who I love and respect and look to are looking to you and to others who are speaking this truth into the reality that we're seeing. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, David. We'll be in touch.
Talk soon. Bye.
Okay.
I wonder if maybe right here is
Abram,
where we should do the music.
Yeah, we just let David have the last word, right?
Yeah. So.
So, are we ending by like good bureaucrats? We go into there?
Radicals, I think, right?
Oh, you wanted? Oh, that's what I'm saying. Okay. Sorry, everybody.
One take podcast.
So we're gonna end like
Let's do it.
We're going to end like good radicals. What's one thing you learned today that you can use to create a more just and equitable world?
It's a lot of different things, but Dr. Kirkland emphasized a note that I'm hearing again and again, and that I have been trying to repeat for a while now, which is this idea of humanization, centering humans, centering the affected, impacted humans in our discourse and our systems and our policy solutions. That's messy, because a lot of people have a lot of needs and it's a lot to untangle. And the way the system is set up, it looks like it's nobody's job really to do all that. And yet, therein lies the great story of the human spirit, that he's pointing to, the story of banding together and overcoming seemingly impossible circumstances, right? Everything that every movie is based on is this idea of a human spirit where we band together and survive and thrive. And that comes from connecting to each other at a much deeper level than the list of tasks or calendar appointments that is typical of our day-to-day, week in, week out work.
Yeah.
How about you, Sam?
I mean, that's the call for schools to listen, right? And it comes back to, I'm actually reminded of what Brian spoke about from Seattle yesterday on the podcast when he talked about trying to find his purpose and still fulfill the tasks before his company. Both of those are examples of ways in which a system is not created to take the action that is going to move social justice forward. Like that was the tension Brian was feeling yesterday, and I feel like that's the tension that you're pointing out here. And what David said was that there's a flaw in the system, and he talked about the reasons why we don't listen better, and he really pointed to I think mostly issues around individuals' egos and biases, but there's also a systemic barrier there that I think I'm still trying to unpack. I think it's kind of the whole reason for this podcast is what are the ways that the system is getting is creating a barrier to us doing our very best and most responsive work. Mm-hmm. But I think my takeaway is similar to yours. At the end, it's just very simple. It's just, we talk so much about listening, and I've been asking this question: what are schools supposed to do right now? And particularly when I spoke to a teacher in a GED program today who said, "Yeah, I mean, none of my students are interested in logging on. Attendance was low before this happened, but now, like, they're really not interested." And so we have this remote learning platform. So then the question I'm asking is, what are we here for? And right now, it's kind of go back to the basics and just listen. Engage, hear what's going on, figure out if there are things that we can do to fill a gap, to meet a need, but also be listening with an eye towards the future. Like, where is this system not working in this moment? Because that is just putting a spotlight on what wasn't working beforehand either.
Yeah. So, help us out. If you're listening to us this far into the podcast, thank you for sticking with us, and help us out. Hit us up on Twitter. It's at RADBUREAU, Rad Bureau. You can search for The Radical Bureaucrat, theradicalbureaucrat.com. Google is helpful in this regard, or find us on Twitter. Let us know what you think. Add your comments, add your links to things that we talked about. We don't have a lot of extra time on our hands beyond recording and putting this out, so we're really looking for support from the community to help us continue this as long as we can. And finally, let's end by being good bureaucrats. The views expressed here are our personal opinions and do not reflect the official or unofficial position of any government agency, policy, party, leader, or really anyone besides the two of us, and maybe you, but maybe not. This content has not been sponsored or approved by anyone and was mostly just made because we wanted an opportunity to talk about things that matter to everyone, whether they realize it or not. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, everybody.
You've been through so much, so many ups and downs. You've given your love, but never like the way it turned.